Our next guest is Rebecca Maxwell with Do Divorce Right. Becca is dedicated to looking at the many different aspects of divorce whilst helping women to find the strength to not only survive this hard time, but thrive through their divorce journey. Becca Maxwell is a divorce coach and relational intelligence consultant. The focus here is to help you to find the support to help you heal, feel lighter, and in a better frame of mind to face the inevitable challenges of your divorce or separation. I'm Lisa Smith, your teen confidence coach at Raising Mindsets. I've been working with teens for 20 years, from being in the WA Police as a specialist child interviewer and within the drug and alcohol section. Years after I left the police, I myself had 3 children and commenced a business as a driving instructor. After witnessing the increase of anxiety, low self-esteem, self-harm, low resilience within our teens, I knew I had the skills and education to help change teens' lives. Having received my diploma in NLP, I am providing tools and strategies to parents and teens to work and grow together to help our teens understand the emotions and the world that they are living in. It is possible to change the mindsets of our teens to grow into confident, independent and happy teens. There is no subject in relation to teens that we will not be talking about, so keep listening and enjoy the journey. Okay, thank you so much for joining us, Becca Maxwell.
Lisa, thanks for having me. It's so good to see you again.
I know, it's fantastic. We always have a good time. So tell us a little bit about you and how you become a divorce coach.
Sure. Well, I've been working in the corporate world for many years in client servicing and in the advertising world. And I became really, really senior. I was a global account director. I was a chief operating officer. And then I became a consultant to the corporate world, teaching them how to have good client relationships. And the founder of the company that I work for created the business after having trained as a marriage counselor, right? So he'd been in advertising, left the industry, retrained himself, became a marriage therapist, like a proper in-depth working with couples. And he thought, God, so much of this is relevant to the corporate world that he decided to take some of those frameworks about relationships, personal relationships, into the corporate world, right? And talking about client relationships. And so I've been working in that space for 5 years and thinking, when I went through my ugly divorce, so much of that was relevant and useful to help me thrive, survive and then thrive through the divorce. Yes. I was like, well, I need to package some of this out for people who are going through divorces.
Yes.
The frameworks for marriage counselling into the corporate world and then back out the other end for divorce.
Oh, 100%. Even in my work, in my other work, I always bring my mindset tools to it. I'm like, okay, so what do you think about that?
So I just decided, it was about a year ago, and I thought there's just so much of this that needs to be shared. It's so helpful and so useful. And if I can get through the shit show that I was having to get through and actually build a beautiful life for myself, I need to help the world with that.
Oh, 100%. I feel like I'm in the same situation where I've been through a separation, which wasn't so nice. And you think, if I could just give some advice, I'm like, oh, they're not ready for it yet. They're not ready for it yet.
No.
So, it's one of those catch-22s where you're like, okay, it's time to back off and let them figure it out. So many of your clients obviously would have children. So what are the 3 main worries that divorced parents are concerned about in relation to their children?
It really depends on a couple of different things, like the stage of the divorce, the age of the children, and the emotional maturity of the person or the couple that I'm dealing with. Usually I'm just dealing with the female, the woman going through the divorce. But if I was to put it into just buckets of the 3 main worries, one is the stress that they think they're going to put the kids under. Oh, but what about the kids? How will they cope? And what are we going to, just projecting a worst case scenario or projecting a trauma onto the children, which is not necessarily how it plays out. A lot of children are much happier having two happy homes than one really crap one. Lisa, am I allowed to swear a little bit?
Yes, you can go right ahead. I'll put it as explicit.
It won't be too explicit, but I do sometimes drop a little bomb. So yeah, the stress that the imagined stress that they might be putting their children under, which is great to be aware of, but I do try and remind them not to over dramatize. Let's not create a future that doesn't necessarily exist. So that's the first one. The second one is about how to talk to the children about what's going on. And that's actually a recurring theme. It's, you know, how do I talk to them? What language do I use? What's age appropriate? What if my ex doesn't want to use the same language? What if he doesn't agree with me? How do I get him to agree on how we should talk to the children? You know, just a lot of kind of discussions around that starting conversation. How do I even tell them? What is it going to look like? I don't know what our homes are going to look like. How can I possibly predict for the children what their experience is going to be like? So there's a real struggle.
What if there's one parent that's trying their hardest to just put a bubble around where the other one's still in that mindset, attacking the other parent? Have you come across any of that?
Definitely. There's a lot of toxicity there, and I guess in answer to that question, it's you can't necessarily control what the other person is doing.
Yes.
So you really have to stick with, what do you need? What is your intention? If you are intending for the children to have as peaceful a time as possible through this process, then focus on that. You can't change what the other person is doing. In fact, there's this incredible study. I haven't even answered the three main worries yet.
I love studies. Go, percentages, give them to.
There's this wonderful study that says when looking at the future of children and the predicted success of children into the future, the single strongest determining factor for their success is a loving mother, a caring mother. So if that mother can keep her head about her and not be too reactive or too triggered when her ex-husband is just doing some stupid shit or saying things to the children that she wouldn't have said herself, it's okay. You can help your children heal through some very ugly stuff. You just be you. You just focus on being the best version of you that you can be.
And that's where the communication is number one.
Exactly. So yeah. And then the third main worry is that they'll fuck up their children somehow.
Yes.
That just the sheer fact of leaving an ugly marriage, a toxic relationship, that single act will somehow fuck up the children. And I guess the answer to that is that none of us are getting out without trauma, right? There's no prize for parenting. You don't get to the end and say, you did, you were the best parent ever. So you can't get it right. Like there is no perfect.
Are you sure? Because I feel like we should have a badge or like a medal or something.
I'll give you a parenting trophy, 100%. And you give me one. I like that.
We'll just give it out.
But nobody gets out of this unscathed, right? There's no child that gets into their 20s and decides, or even as a child, as a teen, decides, I've got it perfect. Everything that my parents have ever done was perfect.
Wish. Yeah. Hope my children will say that when they're 20. Doubt it very much.
They might look back and say, actually, you did a great job. But as they're 17 and saying, you hate me, everything you do is against me, or my 10-year-old saying, like, you hate me, why do you make me cycle to school? Because clearly I hate you. Like,
because your fitness has got nothing to do with life. I love when my children come at me and I'm like, I'm not your friend, I'm your parent. So continue on with what you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah. This is not on me.
No, this is not a me problem. This is
This sounds like a you
I love that. What are the challenges your clients are coming across when dealing with children and divorce?
So some of the challenges, let me see, I've had a couple of notes about this. Okay, there's one challenge that does come up to a little bit more regularly than I would like, and that is about getting the children the support that they need when they need it. And the reason why that becomes a problem is because the two parents often don't agree on what that support should look like, and sometimes don't even agree that they should have any at all. So I, talk to mums about their children are acting out. So there might be, I've experienced it myself, you might have as well, right? Yeah. The children will have a weekend at their dad's house, they come home on Sunday, they're just in a new environment again, and they act like little assholes. Yeah. And, they reject you, and they don't do the things that you expect them to do in your home, and they really act out and they push. And it's kind of sad to see, like, why is my little human broken? Why have you come back from your dad's house, this horrible little mess? So that acting out, if it escalates and continues, I mean, that scenario I've just given you, usually it just takes a few hours, right? Yes. We need a gentle reset into a new home, give them the opportunity to have some quiet time, and then, they come back into the rhythm of the second home, or the alternate home. But if the acting out escalates and becomes a real problem, then you do want to find them some support. Yeah. In my situation, I remember each of the children independently, I felt, needed to see a counsellor, because their behaviours were so extreme that I couldn't cope with them. I needed support to help them. Yeah. And he just refused. He wouldn't believe it. And I think, it's one, he wouldn't believe it. He'd say, first of all, it's your house, it's your problem. You're creating an environment that makes them feel this way. Well, that's entirely unhelpful. And secondly, I think there was
Were we married to the same people, or?
Yeah, exactly. And secondly, I think there was fear there that anything that might be said to a child psychologist would be used against them in a court of law. Yes. You're missing the point. We're trying to help the children. It's, I don't mind signing a document that says none of this escapes the room, but the children help. We need to help them.
Oh, and I'm the biggest advocate on being proactive instead of reactive. It's so much harder to come back from down on the bottom of the hill than just while they're up here, get them the help. So even if they don't need it, let them understand that there's another third party, that you can say whatever you want to, and it's not going to come back on them.
And sometimes that help doesn't need to be the paid for, like the psychiatrists or the counsellors. I understand that can be financially really challenging. I love that there's incentives here, and we're lucky in Australia that there are subsidised opportunities, but they can be difficult to find the right person. It can be difficult to find a person, but that kind of support could just be like a great adult friend, a neighbor that they can have a go-to and express how they're feeling, so long as that's a trusted adult, trusted by the whole family, trusted by the children. Get them some support. And so I think that's
say that for females, they say for younger females, an auntie, like if you've got an auntie in your life, whether it's a biological auntie or whatever, but have an auntie, whereas boys are uncles.
And for boys, it might be like their sports coach. Just make sure you're surrounding them with some really quality men. Yes. My son would be more than happy to share with women. So it doesn't have to be gender-based, but we'll find that support that works for your family, obviously. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is when it relates to the children. How do we build support that's, not just either parent, because that becomes really awkward.
Leave that third party. As we're both aware, divorce or separation isn't pretty. What advice would you give someone who is wanting to leave a toxic relationship or has recently done so?
Well, for somebody who hasn't yet left, it's really worth thinking about. I did a podcast episode around why are bad relationships, bad marriages, worse for women than they are for men. And it was, men.
What feedback did you get from that? I was always, when I was watching it, I was like, I wonder what feedback she's getting.
honestly, I've shared it with a few people who just weren't ready to hear it. They've reached out to me because they're thinking about leaving their marriage. They're just like, oh, no, I'm still not comfortable enough yet. And, you know, and I really want everybody to know I'm not pro-divorce. I'm actually pro-great relationships. But if you find yourself that you have to get through a divorce, then I want you to have support and help to do that. Anyway, so my point was, if you need to leave a toxic relationship, obviously when the time is ready, seek some support if you need to, but remind yourself of why. And then, you know, once you have, why am I doing this? It's because I want the children to have a better life for themselves. It's because I want to have a better life for myself. It's because this is physically hurting the people in the home. That's what I was kind of talking about in the podcast episode, which is women get sick if they're in a just a bad marriage. It plays out physiologically, it plays out physically, the stress and tension in the home. And of course, that passes on to the children as well. So reminding yourself of, why am I leaving this?
Yes.
And then obviously keeping a vision in mind is wonderful. But in reality, I have found most of the women I speak to who are fresh out of their marriage, they can't imagine their future yet. They're still in the erasing what they thought their future was going to be. So in absence of having a vision, I suggest you find expanders. Now, an expander is somebody who has gone ahead of you and can give you an idea of what it could look like. It's a bit like, you know, if you're saving up for a home, then you want to go and look at homes that are slightly, you know, the kind of home that you would like to one day have, even if you're not quite ready to put the deposit down. So you want to expand your vision of what that looks like. Surround yourself or talk to people or seek out podcast episodes or seek out stories of women who've left shitty relationships and gone on and built a beautiful life.
Yes, so obviously I've been involved in a lot of different relationships and leaving, being an ex-police officer. I had to explain for people, pack a bag, get prepped, like have money behind you. So from that extreme to where I was, I had to leave through safety purposes, and I had 3 young children. And to that, like at that moment, I thought, I'm breaking up a family, even though it wasn't me personally.
It was because you packed the bags.
Because our whole mindset about it. But once I made that decision, there wasn't any turning back. And 7 years later, I'm living a happy, vibrant life and meeting wonderful people like yourself.
Exactly. Exactly.
So it is important to know that. And for people who have been in marriages and with children, they've been probably 20 years, 25 years, and they have no idea how to live without that person.
Exactly. It's really hard to imagine. Right. That's right. Yeah. So, you know, I've interviewed you on my podcast because of your story and because that does give that opportunity for people to see it's possible. Those expansive stories. Oh, you know, somebody went from bankruptcy to becoming a millionaire, you know, from the divorce. You surround yourself with those stories and they help motivate you to keep getting through it. Yes,
exactly. But as I've been involved in with obviously team coaching and all that, it's okay. They will get through it. Everyone will get through it if everyone's on the same playing field and the communication, as you said, is at their priority list. So when you start, when I went to when the children went to the psychologist when they were little, as soon as we separated, I put them in, and the first thing that the psychologist stated was, "Don't make excuses." Yeah. So I was like, "Oh, Dad's at work," or "Dad."
Because do not blame the lie, don't they?
It was one of the things that always comes to mind, and that's why boundaries is my biggest thing. It's choices. The word choices comes up in my sentences all the time. I'm like, no, that was your choice to do this. And they're like, oh, So even my children hate it. They're like, yes, I know. Then move away. So good old choices. Love the word.
Yeah, it can be really challenging though. I mean, that can also be a little bit triggering. I can imagine even in your situation where you chose to pack a bag and leave, but it really wasn't a choice, in a way. Like, you were forced to make that choice. You need to be comfortable eventually that you did break up the family. It was your choice to pack up the bags and leave, but actually you were forced to make that choice, and you made that choice for the better of your entire family.
Yes, and you do it, and you look at your children, and as you probably did as well, you stare at your children, you're like, okay, what's the best for them? Because you're down, you put yourself down the bottom. There's no, like, you stare at your children like, what's the best for them?
Yeah,
and
that's really important.
As you said, it's sometimes people go, I'm staying in it for the children. It's like, maybe 2 homes is so much better than having one toxic home.
Yeah, exactly. Staying in it for the children is making yourself sick, probably making the children sick. Like, if it's just never going to get better, I think the best case scenario is you work together to figure out, how can we make this marriage work? Is there a chance it can come together? Give it every opportunity there is. But if it's just not going to, don't stick it out for somebody else's benefit. There's one beautiful life to live. Don't make yourself sick trying to suffer through it. I don't understand.
And again, listeners, we're not saying if you can work together, we're number one. If the relationship can stay together, do everything in your power to keep it together. Because trust me, separation or divorce isn't the most fun, especially in the first year.
Yeah, it's tricky. That's right. It really is. And that's what I was just thinking. Those early years, we're saying, look at the children and make them the priority. That is true until it isn't, right? And by that, I mean, you need to put the children's experience front of mind, when you're thinking through, how do I communicate with my ex? How do I build an amicable relationship with my ex? How do I create a sanctuary and a home where they feel safe and, happy, and all of that is really important. So how am I relating to their father or their other parent in such a way that my children are going to get the best experience from this? Right? So that's great. Put the children first there. But you also need to put yourself first when it comes to the rest of your life. So yeah, put your children first as it relates to their other parent, but you put yourself first otherwise, because you need to fill your cup. You can't be a good version of yourself if you're not well rested, or if you're not finding any joy in life, or if you're constantly stressed and, you'll be barking at the children, etc. So there's a real delicate balance there of, it's okay to not be okay. Look after yourself, be gentle, be calm, just be very aware of.
Well, you have you have amazing children, but your son in particular lately, you've been
my God, my swelling heart. Right?
Your heart's beating out of your chest. Tell us a little bit about, so even if you separate, children can thrive. So tell us a little bit more about Max.
Yeah, so my son, my divorce happened it must be 9 years ago, when my marriage fell apart. And I met a wonderful man 8 years ago. So a year after I'd separated, he came into our lives and quickly became the stepfather for my children. So the children would be bouncing back and forth from 2 different homes for a couple of years. And Max was 10 when he asked me, he'd done a school project and it was about Egypt. And he said, one day I'm going to go to Egypt. And I was like, well, you better start saving then. And so he did. Like, he actually did start saving. He decided he was going to go to Egypt. But better than that, he decided he wanted to take his stepdad to Egypt. It was a boys' trip, right? He wanted, not only did he want a boys' trip to Egypt, he wanted to pay for absolutely everything. He saved up for the flights. He saved up for a boat trip down the Nile for, and a hot air balloon trip for the
Oh
children.
my goodness.
He even made his stepdad sign a contract that would say, I'm not going to pay for anything on this trip. I'm going to let Max pay for everything.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was so cute. And at one point, Olaf was saying to me, like, I feel really awkward about this. Like he was 13 by the time he came up with enough money.
Yeah.
And they went to Egypt in January of this year. They had an incredible time. They're glowing in their photos. It's so cute. But Olaf had said to me, I feel really awkward that my 13-year-old son, stepson, is insisting on paying for my holiday. And I was like, you have to let go of that. You have to let him pay for it because you're bringing him joy in doing so. He's like, all right, fine. They had a blast. It was so beautiful.
Oh my goodness. That is amazing. Like my children will, well, one he saves, but the other two, they'll save up to a particular point and then, I've got to have this. I was like, so when I was reading Max's story, I was like, kids, look at this. Yeah. How about I'm going to send it to your kids' messenger and you read this and see what you want.
For any listeners, yeah, it's so cute. So for any listeners, we'll include the link to the article in Mamma Mia.
Yes,
so you can have a read through the story.
Yeah.
So
what a great goal to have, and it's achieved. So that's in my course, I'm all about setting goals. It doesn't have to be an Egypt trip course, goal. However, basic goals, and you can achieve anything if you put your mind to it.
Exactly, it's so true.
Yeah. Yes. It's important for parents to take time out for themselves, as you just said, and don't burn themselves out with stress. So what advice would you give them?
We talk through, it's really kind of individual because, yes, everybody does have stress. And I think what's interesting for the newly separated and going through divorce is a lot of that, there's a lot of alone time that's new alone time. And it's very possible for people to kind of get caught up in, fear is not quite the right word, but caught up in sadness when they have that alone time. And so what I thoroughly recommend is I've got some techniques on, well, how do you connect back, whether it's connect to yourself, connect to the community, connect to extended friends and family. How do you have fun again? So the first thing I ask them to do is connect with their values. So what are your values? Connect with your strengths. Remind yourself what makes you amazing and what's important to you. Yes. And then start filling some of your alone time with ways in which you can exercise those strengths and ways in which you're spending time doing things that are important to you. And the more you do that, the more you are filling up your own cup, the more you are doing what you enjoy. Yes. And you start just, I want to say expanding again, but you start living this life that you thought wasn't available to you anymore. Yes. You start exercising yourself in different ways. This is really lovely. Do you know what I mean? They might go to an art exhibition and at first it'll be really scary because they haven't done anything on their own for a while. But then it's like, but I've met these lovely people and do you know what I mean? They start connecting back to what it was like.
And it's amazing how many of my friends who are just separated go to the movies by themselves. They're like, if I can go to the movies by myself, I can do anything. I was like, it's so basic. But it's one of those baby barriers, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. I can remember the first year I didn't even go out. I literally when my children went to visit their father, I stayed at home. I was waiting for that phone call because I thought just in case. Even my parents said to me, Lisa, you're not dead. You can go out when you don't have the children. And from there I was like, yes, kick and go. Socialising, become my socialite again. So,
I thoroughly recommend people don't sit at home and wait for the children to come back. No. Fill that time with something that feels good for you. It's time. Yeah.
And that's why even last night I just went, okay, kids, let's go to the beach. So kicking and screaming, but it's my happy place. So I was like, okay, ground, feet on the sand, looking out. The dolphins were there.
Shut up.
I know, it was amazing. I was thinking this week's going to be a good week. It's always one of those. It's always leaving Sunday afternoon, a fabulous time. Well, is there anything else you wanted to add or give advice to parents with kids or parents who don't have children and have just separated, or people that don't have kids and have just separated?
I think we've touched on a lot of it, and it doesn't hurt to hear advice again and again, which is, do be honest with your children. Don't overshare, but don't try to hide the truth either. So there is a real balance there of saying, your father and I have decided to separate because the marriage wasn't working out, or, you know, your father's moved on to another family, or whatever it is. Like, you find your way to communicate with them, but don't lie to them. And and when I say don't overshare, you don't need to say, you know, the reason it's broken up is because he hasn't had a mistress and he's been cheating on me for a year and a half. And let's keep some of the stuff down. Obviously, keep the communication channels as open as you possibly can. Let them know that you're willing to hear from them or hear what's going on with them, as much as that is possible for you. And also let them know that you'll want to find them some support, you know, outside of the two parents, if that's what they think that they would need.
Fantastic. So if listeners want to know more about yourself and do Divorce Right, where can they go and check out your amazing?
You can find me on Instagram mostly. So it's Do Divorce Right. I'll respond to all the DMs, and you can have a look through my content there. The website is dodivorceright.com or .com.au. They're the best places. I mean, I've also on Facebook, it's Becca Maxwell, Do Divorce Right is the page. So reach out.
Oh no, I've sent handballs
and the podcast,
people your way. Yeah, podcast, yes. Already handballed people your way. I was like, look at this information, and they're loving it. So anyone going through separation or divorce, go onto those pages. And thank you very, very much again.
Thanks so much for having me. I feel like that time has gone really fast.
I know, so
really quickly. You might have to slow it down. I
know. Remember, like last time, remember when I was on your podcast, it's like boom, 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 boom. We're like, okay, breathe, take a breath. Thank you again.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Raising Teen Mindsets. If you loved it, please share it on Instagram or Facebook for your friends, and be sure to tag me at Raising Mindsets so I can say thank you. And if you really wanted to spread the joy, you can pop a review on Apple Podcasts. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to work with me further, all of the free resources and my courses can be found at raisingmindsets.com.au. Now, I truly hope this podcast is so much value and you can use it to bond with your teen and start taking small steps for big changes. Have the greatest day and keep listening.